Here's a prime opportunity for the Romans to prove this is what happens if you claim to be a king. Romans weren't interested in justice either. They were just playing politics, but now they have an opportunity. The soldiers are unrestricted. All of the gloves are taken off. They know that Jesus is going to be killed, he's going to be crucified, so they can do whatever they want to him. They bring him into the Praetorium. This is where the Romans are. All their soldiers are in their barracks. And all they do is abuse Jesus, just to amuse themselves before executing him like a common criminal. Like I said, this is the same cohort that arrested him. Soldiers intending to show the Jews what happens to somebody when you rebel against Rome. They're unrestricted. There's nobody going to hold them back. And so this is what they do in verse 28. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They took all his clothes off of him and put this mock robe onto him. The other Gospels say it's a faded robe. In other words, this was the robe that somebody had thrown out and they had gathered together. Here's a bunch of young soldiers. They're allowed to do whatever they want to this guy, and so they go to work. After twisting a crown of thorns together, verse 29, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and they knelt down before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." You can just picture them taking turns, standing in front of Jesus, bowing down before him, "Hail, King of the Jews." And then they crushed this crown of thorns down on his head. And they spat on him, verse 30 says, and they took the reed and began beating him on the head, pounding the crown of thorns harder into his skull, his face running down with blood. After they mocked him, they took the scarlet robe off him and put his own garments back on him. After they ripped that off of him, they put it back on, his regular clothes. And with Mark tells us in his gospel in Mark 15:19, they kept beating him on the head. This is to dehumanize him. This is to humiliate him. This is to send a message to every other Jew: don't cross Rome. Pilate is allowing this message to be sent. Any Jew who thinks of opposing Rome, this is what happens to him. This is to fulfill what Isaiah says in Isaiah 53, verse 3. He was despised, forsaken of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face. Why are they hiding their face? Because they don't want to look at him. He looks so bad. He looks so beaten. He looks so abused. He goes on to say he was despised and we did not esteem him. And in Isaiah 52, verse 14, it says that he was marred more than any man, meaning he's almost unrecognizable as a human being. This is what sinners do if they get their hands on God. People would like to hide their face from them and discuss out of the horror of the brutality of this. But in reality, the Jews themselves are taking quite devilish delight in this. Which leads to the last point, their murderous rage. You would think that that would be enough for them, but they want to see him crucified. Verse 33, and when they had come to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, the other Gospels say it was called Calvary. But Golgotha just means it's a place of the skull. Either it looked like a skull or there were so many skulls of the victims of people who had died there. That's why they called it the place of the skull. They gave him wine to drink mixed with gall. That's a way of deadening the pain, not out of a sense of compassion, but they want to prolong his death. After tasting it, he was unwilling to drink it. In other words, he spit it out. And when they had divided up his garments among them, they cast lots, and sitting down, they began to keep watch over him there. In verse 32, it says, actually, they're coming out. They found a man named Simon of Cyrene, whom they pressed into service to bear the cross. So before they even came to Calvary, going fast enough for them, so they pressed Simon into service.